Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Living With and Beyond Cancer. My name's Steve Poynton of Steve Poynton Counselling and Support. This is a podcast for people who have or have had cancer. As a twice diagnosed kidney cancer patient who has been in remission for 8 years, I recognise the trials and tribulations of what happens next once we've finished treatment or are in long-term maintenance treatment and try and return to our lives. If you want to know more about myself and why I'm doing this podcast, please go back to episode 1 released on World Cancer Day on the 4th of February 2026. Today I'm joined by Kevin Donaghy, who's somebody who I've followed on social media for a little while, and somebody who's used their own cancer experience and connected to other patients to bring stories of hope to others. But before we get into today's episode though, I want to say a few words about a sponsor of the show, the Resilience Room. If you heard a previous episode of the podcast, you would have heard Dr. Alex Turner and myself discuss the importance of the Resilience Room and how it can help employers support their staff with their mental health and how to cope with loss and grief in specific work environments. The Resilience Room is a training company offering a number of in-person training courses. Too much training these days becomes a tick box online bore, and the Resilience Room understands the power of getting in the room with each other. Current courses on offer include Wellbeing in the Workplace and Loss and Grief. All courses are bespoke and can be tailored to the needs of your employees. Please have a look at the Resilience Room's website on www.resilienceroom.co.uk. So, I'd like to welcome Kevin to the show. Kevin, do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself, where you live, what you do, what you did for a living, what happened or where you were before cancer came into your life, that sort of thing?
Yes, certainly, and thanks very much for having me on, Steve. Yes, I live about an hour south of Edinburgh in the Scottish borders, and I've worked in IT for about 35 years, travelling throughout the UK, and it's been a good career so far. But the life changed for us in early 2018 when, having made a number of trips to my local GP to show them a strange mark on my left forearm, which a number of medical professionals had a look at and said it doesn't look like cancer, put some cream on it, come back if it changes shape or size. I wasn't too concerned about it because I'd been told it didn't look like cancer, but it did change shape and size, and being of Celtic complexion and having avoided the sun most of my life, I was then referred to a dermatologist who again had a look at this cyst on my forearm through a dermoscope, said it doesn't look cancerous, but we'll do a biopsy just in case. And so we did the biopsy, and the person doing it said, "Oh, it looks quite deep. Should never mention the word cancer." And about a week later, when I was down south at a business meeting, I got a call from the dermatologist at my local hospital saying, "Can you come in this afternoon?" And you don't realise at the time, but when a consultant says that to you, you think, "Oh, wait a minute, there might be something wrong." And I said, "Well, I can't come in today. I'm down in London, but I can come in, late tomorrow evening," which I did. And he told me that the biopsy had shown that I had stage 2 melanoma, skin cancer, which was a bit of a surprise to me because for most of my life I've avoided the sun. I cover up, I use high protection skin cream, and so it was a bit of a surprise to myself and my wife to be told that. And I was told that it needed to be removed through plastic surgery, and they would try and identify a lymph node to see if it had spread. I didn't know too much about cancer, apart from we all knew people that had cancer previously or were living with cancer, and it was a bit of a shock to myself and my wife, and our kids were mid-teenagers, and we decided not to tell them until we knew if it had been removed and if it had spread or not. A period of uncertainty, and I carried on work as normal. It wasn't impacting my ability to work, but it was always there at the back of my mind that we needed to know whether the cancer had spread. Fast forward a few months, I went in for a procedure to identify which lymph nodes it had potentially gone to, and they identified if it spread, then it would be under my arm, left hand side. I had surgery, which went very well, plastic surgery to remove the cyst, and they took a lymph node and said they'd be in touch in a few weeks' time to say whether it spread or not. And at that point, that was probably my first introduction to scanxiety, even though I hadn't had a scan. It was the waiting to find out whether the cancer had spread or not. And your mind, as you know, Steve, plays various tricks on you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah, you feel the twinge, you think it's spread.
absolutely. And I'm sure we'll come back to that in a second because there's a lot you've gone through there in the opening sort of remarks there, Kevin,
Yeah,
almost from very, very, I guess, reassured from medical professionals that it wasn't cancer to start with. I mean, it's interesting how their remarks were, it's not cancer, rather than we're not sure what it is, we'll have a look,
yeah.
but it's not cancer. That's quite an interesting response, really. But how did it feel, if it's not too strange a question, to be told you had stage 2 cancer on your arm, which is not a stereotypical place where you find cancer?
You're right. It's not. It felt very bizarre because I just never thought at all it'd be cancerous. I thought maybe, initially, is it a trapped hair? Is it, have I been bitten by an insect? These things go through your mind. And skin cancer, it's the only cancer you can actually see. There's other cancers you can feel, but this is the only cancer you can actually see. But it just never occurred to me, and especially not skin cancer, because I'm, if I walk down the street, I'm the guy in the shady side of the street. I'm the guy with a hat on and the long sleeve, t-shirt, and all my life I've done the best to avoid the sun. So yeah, I just perhaps a bit of denial. It can't be cancer, skin cancer. It shouldn't happen to me.
And when you got that phone call in London, we've said on this podcast many times, that phone call, can you come in later today? They're never coming in to say it's good news, are you? That's torture, that period between you getting that call and getting into the hospice.
It is, you're right. They never call you and rush you in for good news. So yeah, it was at the forefront of my mind. I couldn't think of about anything else. Called my wife, told her I'd been asked to go in, and that's all I could think about until I sat down in front of the dermatologist.
Yeah, it's really difficult. So you managed to carry on working. You had the biopsy results. How did that come back?
Well, I was in the middle of Edinburgh. I'd met a friend for a bite to eat, and it was a Friday afternoon, and it just happened to be the anniversary of my dad's death. He died a couple of years beforehand, and I was going to meet my mum and my sister just to have a wee drink and remember my dad. And I got a call from the hospital, and I was on the middle of Princes Street, beautiful view of the castle and Princes Street Gardens. And the person that called me from the hospital said, "You can have a good weekend. The cancer has not spread. We've got it. Carry on with your life," pretty much. And I sort of dropped to my knees in the middle of Princes Street and just started crying. The emotion just overcame me. And people must have thought it was quite strange, this middle-aged man just sort of sobbing in the middle of the busy street in Edinburgh. But I'd never felt a wave of relief like that in my life. And so I called my wife, told her good news. They've got the cancer, not spread, everything's fine. Met my mum, my sister. We had a lovely afternoon, and that was it. We could carry on with our life. I'd escaped potentially disastrous period in my life, so everything was fine, Steve, and still carried on being very careful. In fact, even more careful in the sun, because 90% of melanoma cancers are UV related, whether that's direct from sunlight or from tanning salons.
I can just hear on the emotion of the day it was anyway, to then get that. I mean, I can't imagine you as many better places in the world to find out that kind of information for an afternoon ahead of you. But yeah, I can just tell that the sense of relief there. So if we move into 2019,
Yeah.
the joy didn't last particularly long. What happened next?
Yeah, so for about 18 months, life carried on as normal. And towards the end of 2019, I started to get a bit of a back pain, which I put down to, was I sleeping funny? Twinged something when, reaching up for a shelf or whatever. It persisted for about a week. And I thought, well, if it carries on, then I need to go and ask a doctor about this. And again, I was away on business. I was in Manchester at an event, and the pain got so bad, I ended up leaving the event and calling 111 and just saying, I'm in a lot of pain. I don't know what it is. Was it a slipped disc? Was it a trapped nerve? And ambulance crew came to the hotel I was staying in. They assessed me. They gave me some pain relief, and they decided to take me into the hospital in Manchester to one of the A&E departments just to get me checked out because they didn't know what was causing the pain. So I went to hospital, waited to see an A&E doctor who was incredibly thorough, checked me out, sent me for an X-ray, and then after the X-ray, she came and spoke to me and said, "Look, I just want to do another X-ray. Something I'm not happy with, but I just want to do another X-ray to check." So I got another X-ray, and at no point was I thinking, this is anything to do with cancer. I was thinking, it was a back problem that was causing the pain. And so she did another X-ray. I had some pain relief, and I travelled home the next day. And then I got a phone call from the hospital in Manchester saying, "Can you come in for a CT scan?" And again, I'm thinking, okay, they've possibly found something on the X-ray. Never occurred that it had anything to do with cancer. I said, "Well, actually, I live in Scotland, so if you can send me a letter, I'll take that to my local hospital," which I did. I went in for a CT scan, first one I've ever had. If you've had one, they give you the contrast, which is a very strange feeling. And I don't know if you've had it, but it's always a metallic taste in your mouth.
Yeah. You feel like you're going to wet yourself at any moment.
Yeah, it's a very strange feeling. I've had quite a few since, so
Yeah.
you get used to it. But had the CT scan and then was given an appointment to go and see an oncologist. And at that point, the alarm bells really should have been ringing, to be referred to an oncologist. 18 months previously, I was told, that the cancer hadn't spread. Everything was fine. So I then made the worst decision in my life, travelling up to Edinburgh on my own, having told my wife and a very good friend, no, it can't be anything serious. They might just want to check, with further tests if they're concerned about anything. So on Friday the 13th of December 2019, about 10:40 in the morning, I sat opposite an oncologist who told me that unfortunately my melanoma had bypassed my lymphatic system and had presented itself as two tumours, one next to my spine, which was causing the pain, and another one on my right lung. And I had stage 4 metastatic melanoma, and he told me it was life-limiting and it was incurable as well. And perhaps you can relate to this, Steve. I just went into shock. This was not what I was expecting to hear. I know he carried on speaking, and you're trying to take in what he's saying. And he mentioned that the treatment that they used for this type of cancer was immunotherapy, which was a rather new cancer treatment, and hopefully they could extend my life. And once I'd taken in the information, I started to ask him some questions of, how likely is this? He told me there was a 33 to 40% chance that I would respond to immunotherapy to extend my life. And I asked him if it didn't work, what was the potential outcome? And he told me life expectancy was about 9 months if I didn't respond to the treatment. And so I then had to call my wife, who was down an hour away, and she had to come up to Edinburgh to meet me, and met with my sister and my mum, and I suppose we just cried a lot, Steve, for the next few hours trying to take what had been told.
I mean, wow, what a blow. And it feels, doesn't it, that blindsided you completely because you weren't expecting it because of the all clear that you'd had. And then to sit and hear that on your own. And not only that, then to have to make the call and tell your wife. That must have been a really difficult period, Kevin. And 9 months, when you stare down the barrel of potentially 9 months, how does that feel?
Yeah, and I couldn't tell Sophie on the phone. I had to wait until she came up. I just wasn't able to do that. Yeah, and I was 50 years old. It's not young, but I really didn't want to disappear. Just 2 weeks before Christmas, and so many thoughts were going through your head. My kids were sort of late-ish teens. What do we tell them? When do we tell them? When will I start treatment? When will I know if the treatment's working? There's so many things that go through your head. The oncologist had said to me, there'll be a Macmillan nurse who will come and speak to you, after this consultation. And at that point, you're handed into the hands of Macmillan. I know in some hospitals it's Maggie's. But I just walked out there, Steve. I just wanted to get as far away from that hospital as possible after hearing that news. So yeah, you're in shock. You go through the various stages of, denial, anger, and eventually, accidents. But yeah, it was a life-changing conversation. We just didn't know what the future held for us.
Horrendous. That was December 19, and we know what
Yeah.
was just around the corner in December 2019 for the rest of us, never mind you. How did that
Yeah.
all fit in with starting treatment, and how did that... Well, let's go with the treatment first, then how did
Yeah.
the world pandemic impact anything?
Yeah, so I was scheduled to start treatment at the end of January, and my cancer centre is the Edinburgh Cancer Centre at the Western General Hospital up in Edinburgh. But I have a local hospital just 10 minutes walk away down here in the Borders, and I asked if my treatment, which was going to be immunotherapy delivered through IV, if that could happen in my local hospital, and they arranged for that to happen, which became a blessing a few months later, that I could just walk to the hospital and walk back again. So I started treatment on the 31st of January 2020. And because we'd been told that, if I didn't respond to the immunotherapy, may only have about 9 months, we decided that 2020 was going to be, we would spend the time in between treatment, if it was well enough, travelling the UK, spending time with friends and family, travelling abroad if we could get insurance, which I didn't realise at that time might have been a challenge to get travel insurance. And we just wanted to pack as much in as possible within that time frame, and not knowing what was going to happen 6 weeks later with COVID restrictions coming in, it was certainly a time of complete change. And I'd been self-employed for a number of years, and thankfully I'd taken out some insurance, so I made the decision to stop working because we wanted to make the best use of the time if there was only a short period of time available.
I mean, thankfully you had that insurance policy that allowed you to do that, I hear,
Yeah,
because we know how hard it was for self-employed people through COVID, never
yeah,
mind if you're going through stage 4 cancer treatment as well. That would
yeah,
have been a massive worry. How did you cope mentally, Kevin, with the potential 9 months,
yeah.
being in lockdown and not being able to go anywhere? How did you cope with all that at the same time?
I mean, looking back, I didn't, Steve. I thought I did, but I didn't. Going into lockdown, and our son was at university, we told him to come back. We could see what was happening. So the four of us were, in the house at that point in time, and we tried to make the best of it, as everybody did, but there was a real sense of isolation because I didn't know anybody who had melanoma skin cancer, and I didn't know anyone who had stage 4 cancer, and it took me a while. My tribe to find people who were going through something similar. One of the strange benefits of COVID lockdown was that everyone started to jump on Zoom and had Zoom quizzes and Zoom chats and Zoom events, and they just had a Zoom group supporting people with melanoma cancer popped up, and I found that, and that for me was a life-changing experience where I was able to talk to people who were going through something similar. And we could have a laugh. We know, when a bunch of people affected by cancer get together, there can be some dark humour, Steve, and
Gallows humour,
gallows humour, and there's an amazing bunch of people that I didn't feel isolated. I didn't feel alone anymore, and that really helped me during COVID lockdown and the immunotherapy treatment.
How was the treatment? Were you lots of side effects? How did it affect you?
For the first 6 to 7 months, it was fine. I would do the 10-minute walk into my local hospital, get the IV in the back of my hand, have the treatment, then walk home. I felt fine. And I felt guilty because I was going in and everyone was masked up. The staff were absolutely fantastic. But you were sitting next to people who were probably on chemotherapy. You tended not to talk, especially during COVID times, and you could see people were going through a really, really bad time. And there was me walking in, looking as healthy as ever, and walking back out again and going in. It was initially supposed to be every 3 weeks, but due to COVID restrictions, they decided to give me a double dose and make it every 6 weeks, which they had not done before. So, they're entering a period of unknown, but for about 6 months, I felt fine, and COVID restrictions were starting to ease. And during that time, having started the treatment at the end of January, I got my first scan results on April, and it was a lovely sunny day, as thankfully it was for most people during COVID. We were in the garden, and I got a phone call from the hospital to say that both my tumours had actually shrank a little bit by a few millimetres. There were no other tumours, and that came as a huge relief to myself and my family that the immunotherapy looked like it was working and working very quickly, which obviously helped. There was a long way to go. We didn't know what the future looked like, but 6 to 7 months it felt fine.
You take anything, don't you, at that point, and grab it and run with it. Anything
Absolutely.
sort of positive, you grab that, absolutely. I mean,
You do.
before we go on, I just want to say a few words about a second sponsor of the show, Corporate Wellbeing Solutions. If you're a business owner or managing a team, it's worth checking out Corporate Wellbeing Solutions. They specialise in occupational health support, providing high quality practical reports with a really fast turnaround. So you're not left waiting when we've got live employee situations to deal with. For employee assistance programme, giving your staff access to qualified counsellors, along with mental health and wellbeing support whenever it's needed. If you want straightforward, reliable support that actually helps you manage your people properly, have a look at Corporate Wellbeing Solutions or email them on occhealth@corporatewellbeingsolutions.com. So you mentioned the support that you found online. What sort of additional support were you offered, if anything, in terms of, I know you had the insurance policy, so financially, was anything offered to you, sort of state support? And more importantly, I guess, mental health support. Were you offered any counselling, anything like that, Kevin?
Yeah. I mean, it was such a state of flux for everybody during COVID. Things went online. Certainly at our local cancer centre, there was a Macmillan team who were fantastic, and they took us through sort of induction and what to be prepared for. And there was a Macmillan nurse aligned to us as well that we could call at any time and have a chat, and that was invaluable because not just for myself but for my wife as well. My kids could access it if they wanted to. But yeah, Macmillan were fantastic, but it was very much hands off. We were offered certainly assistance for counselling as well, which it was good to know it was there. But you probably relate to this. Blokes aren't very good at asking for help or seeking help. Sophie certainly used the Macmillan service as well, and thankfully, because I had insurance in place, I didn't look to access any state assistance. And again, Macmillan did point us towards what we potentially could look into. But yeah, Macmillan were fantastic. I'd heard about Maggie's, but all the Maggie centres were closed, and I wasn't going up to Edinburgh for my treatment, so I knew they were there. But it became a voyage of discovery, online, just trying to, without Googling too much, because that can be dangerous. It can take you down rabbit holes, Steve. Just trying to find verified information on immunotherapy, the type that I was on melanoma, and any other areas to get support. There was groups on Facebook that were pointed to as well. So the more you shared and the more you talked to people, the more you heard about other support organisations and information as well. But it took us to go out and look for it primarily in order to find it, Steve.
Yeah, there's a couple of things in there I can really relate to, Kevin. The first, the Google thing or any other search engine. I remember receiving my initial diagnosis and I was given the Macmillan handbooks and this cancer-specific information. And the first thing the CNS said to me is, look through there, but don't read Google. Whatever you do, don't go on to Dr. Google. Yeah. And you're dead right. I mean, if there's an information source, but it never gives you the good stories at the top. That'll come somewhere when you've given up looking. Men talking, I don't know if you know my background, but I used to be a senior manager in a security company. And I was a head doorman of a nightclub, so the last thing I did was ever talk to people about how I was feeling, because it'd be used to beat you with, basically. But I did access counselling, and as you probably know, and listeners will know, that changed my life massively, and I'm now a qualified counsellor myself. So anybody who is wary of going to counselling, male or female, I personally would implore you to give it a go. I know it's not for everybody, but you just never know where that safe space can help you. It's really, really invaluable. But yeah, I absolutely hear you got your support from the peers. I uh, sort of found Kidney Cancer Support Network, as it was then, Action Kidney Cancer now, and their forum, I've said on this podcast many times, was just as life-saving as the medical treatment itself. To speak to people who've been through the same treatment and come out the other side, you realise you can do it and it can work. It's that talking to other patients there's no substitute for it. Counselling's great, yeah, but speaking to others is absolutely the
It
one.
is, and it's a lived experience. I mean, if prior to cancer, if a friend of mine had told me about their cancer experience, cancer journey, I'd try and empathise, but I didn't know what it felt like. But when you meet people who have that lived experience, and it was heartbreaking sometimes because we'd lose members of our little community, which is the unfortunate nature of cancer. But you didn't have to spend a lot of time explaining how you were feeling and hoping the person might understand or might want to carry on the conversation as well. It's absolutely invaluable, certainly for my mental health and for my family's.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You said there, if a friend had said that to you before your diagnosis, you would have tried to empathise. That's the difference in sympathy and empathy, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Sympathise is one thing, but you can't truly empathise unless you've lived something very similar.
Mm.
So, how long did the immunotherapy go on for?
It was scheduled to last for 2 years. After about 7 months, I started to experience some of the side effects of immunotherapy. And the thing about immunotherapy, the best description I've heard is it takes the handbrake off your immune system and basically enables your immune system to try and fight specific types of cancer. Immunotherapy was initially targeted at melanoma because melanoma didn't respond to chemotherapy or radiotherapy, and 99% of the people with advanced stage melanoma didn't survive more than 12 months. So immunotherapy, it boosts your immune system, which is great at trying to find melanoma, and these days it's used in other types of cancer treatment, but it can lead to your body attacking itself. And I'd had a history of ulcerative colitis for about 25 years, which your body attacks your intestines, and I ended up having a severe flare-up of ulcerative colitis. And by that time, my tumours were stable. There were no new tumours presenting. I was getting scanned every 3 months. And it got to the stage that between my oncologist and my gastro, I had the same gastro for over 20 years, they decided that they needed to get my colitis under control because that was potentially life-threatening as well. And they decided to pause the immunotherapy to get the colitis under control. So I ended up in hospital for a month, just as the second COVID lockdown was looming. I ended up in hospital in Edinburgh, and I could only see my family through waving to the window and speaking to them on the phone, which again had a severe impact on my mental health. And during that period, I lost 4 stone in weight, couldn't really retain anything. So that was the main side effect that I got from immunotherapy. And after a long period of convalescence at home as well as in the hospital and regular scans, they put me on some different drugs which actually reduced my immune system, suppressed it, which I was very concerned about because I was on immunotherapy to boost my immune system and treat the cancer. And here I was going on to immunosuppressants to try and get the colitis under control. But I just had to put my faith in my oncologist and my gastro that they knew what they were doing. After about 9 months, still not receiving immunotherapy, the colitis was under control, and my tumours still continued to shrink. And it was decided not to put me back on immunotherapy because the oncologist was quite convinced that I'd responded so well to that my body was still fighting the cancer. And after about 2.5 years of starting, I got to the point where I was NED. There was no evidence of disease. And I still carried on getting scanned through that period from 3 months to then 6 months and then annual. And I had my last scan back in January. And again, it shows no evidence of disease. And I'm glad to say, coming up for six years later, here I am, and life is good, but life has certainly changed, Steve.
Yeah, we'll come on to how it's changed in a minute, but How did that, or how do you compute that, Kevin? I had a very similar thing. I was told 4 years or up to
Yeah.
4 years, and maths says that's longer. But
It,
how do you
it,
go from 9 months
yeah.
to still being here?
It's it's a lot to take in, because you always think it's going to start growing again. I'm going to get new tumors. It is going to come back. That's always there at the back of your mind. And I don't know about you, but I just had a frustrating desire to do everything and pack in as much as possible, which would drive Sophie crazy. Whenever something came up, I want to do it. I want to go on that walk, go up that Munro. I want to go away for a few days. I want to try something. I just had this insatiable desire to just do things, because at the back of my mind I'm thinking, even though it's under control, it might pop up again, and I might not respond. It took me a while to get back to considering going back to work as well, which I think I needed for my mental health as well, and something to keep me occupied. But it's a life-changing experience. You don't want to go through it. You don't want other people to go through it. But it gives you a different perspective on life, Steve.
Absolutely, it certainly does. So speaking of something different, something you are very passionate about, I know from following your social media and looking at your website yesterday, I noticed how active you are on the actual media talking about this. What have you got involved with, Kevin, that benefits other patients now?
Yeah, going back to the time with our melanoma Zoom group, and getting hold of a couple of books written by a chap called Ian Donaghy, who's no relation at all, an amazing man on LinkedIn that certainly recommend people follow. He'd written a couple of books, one about kindness and one about bereavement, where people shared their personal experiences. I came up with the idea of gathering some stories of people directly or indirectly affected by cancer, and what hope meant to them or means to them, and the ability to share my story but hear other people's stories through the Zoom group. I just thought it'd be a nice idea to gather a number of stories, and if I could get sponsorship to produce a book and give the book away, give a few hundred copies of the book away. It was about a year post my diagnosis, and once I'd got over the worst of my colitis flare-up, I just decided to ask people that I knew if they would like to share their stories. One of the first people that I mentioned this to was a customer of mine who had been through head and neck cancer, and that had been life-changing for him. And so we got together, and I had no experience of writing a book or even publishing a book, but just sat down with Ricky, and we had a chat, which I recorded, and I asked him just to talk about his experience with cancer, and try and get him to talk about the emotions of what he'd been through, and talk about what hope meant to him, or at the time, or now. I had a very good friend, Derek, who is a graphic designer. He had helped people to produce books, so I asked Derek if he'd like to give his free time to be involved. Gathering Ricky's story and asking a few other people's. Ricky had asked me, how much does it cost to produce this book, and who are you going to give it to? And I had no idea. I'd never produced a book before, so I just plucked a figure out of the air and said, I think it'll cost X £1,000 to produce this book and give it away. And the very next day, Ricky called to say that his company would sponsor the whole event, and they would pay for the book to be produced. So we went into sort of production mode with myself and Derek, and gathered stories from people that we knew, contacted people on social media, and asked them if they'd like to share their story. And Ricky's company helped us with some PR, and we just came up with a very simple brief, which was, tell us in less than 3,000 words about your cancer experience, the emotions that you went through, the fears that you had, shock, how you told your family, and importantly, what hope meant or means to you. And half the people that ended up in the book would write their story. The other half would have a chat like this over Zoom. I'd ask them questions, as you are, Steve. I'd use the video to write up notes. I would then write their story for them for approval, and the video was always deleted. No one else would ever see the video. And I just lent on friends and family to help out. So my son, my sister, another friend did the editing. My nieces and nephews, who'd all been at university, They did the proofreading. My daughter was studying illustration. She came up with the jacket cover and an illustration of a lady called Anna inside as well. And we got to the point where, we had about 1,000 copies that we could give away. And I just contacted cancer charities and cancer treatment centres and asked them if they would like free of charge copies of the book, just to make available and give to people. And Maggie's, I remember going into Maggie's in Edinburgh and said, I have an idea, I've got nothing to show you, but we're producing this book, would you like copies? And within 24 hours they said they would take them in all their UK centres. So it just started off as an idea of, we want to produce this book and give it away. And the main theme in the book is, you're not alone. There's something within some of these stories that you'll be able to relate to, whether you have cancer or you're supporting someone with cancer, Steve.
I mean, wow, that's just fantastic, isn't it? And the reason for doing it is a very similar reason why I do this, is to help people to understand that there is hope at the end of it. And unfortunately, as you said when you're talking about the forum before, sometimes some people don't get that opportunity, and I recognise that. But there is hope if you manage to get through the treatment. Life isn't over. Yes, it's different, but to be able to relate to other people's stories, it's very, very powerful, isn't it, Kevin?
It is, and from the very outset with myself and Derek and the other people involved, it would have been very easy, Steve, to write a story. I have 39 stories in there and everyone lived happily ever after, but we know that is not the reality of cancer. So we had some stories told in the third person, someone who had lost someone's cancer, and people shared stories with us that that had terminal cancer, and we knew at some point that they would die. But it was very important for us that in any future prints of the book, that their family had the opportunity to share something. A very good friend of ours, a lady we got to know, Kate Rackham. Unfortunately, she died a couple of years ago of secondary breast cancer. But her husband, Mark, had written a beautiful poem about Kate, and we added that as well as a note from Mark about Kate as well. So we always say this is our book. It belongs to the 60 people that gave their stories, gave their time, and the sponsors as well. After giving away the first 1,000 copies, we had more cancer charities and treatment centres asking us for copies. So we raised more money again through sponsorship, and to date, we've given over 8,000 copies of the book away free of charge. It is available for sale. All the royalties go to Maggie's, but the priorities was to get the book out and say to people, if it's helped you, then pass it on to someone else. This isn't about selling copies. It's about making them available.
I mean, that's just incredible. From a target of a few hundred to funding for 1,000 to now 8,000. That must feel quite an achievement.
It is, and we know it's helping because people get in touch with us. They'll send us an email, or even at cancer events and non-cancer events, I've had people come up to me and say, I've read your book, and they'll tell me about the story that they connected with. The first story in our book is actually about kidney cancer, and you and I were chatting about this wonderful 3D model of Andy's kidney that was produced. But there's something relatable for everybody, whether you're directly or indirectly affected by cancer. And it's not an easy read, but cancer is not an easy topic, or sort of something to live with. We're all very proud of what we've achieved, and we've got a few other projects lined up as well. At the heart of it, it's you aren't alone. And the day we're told, Steve, of our cancer diagnosis, you do feel isolated, don't you?
Absolutely. I mean, I felt like my knees had been chopped off at that point, and you do feel very alone. No matter how many people you have around you, it's very, very difficult. But if people want a copy of your book, Kevin, I know you said they're in Maggie centres and cancer charities, so if you are close to a Maggie centre, you're more than likely to find one in there. But if somebody did want to buy it, where can they buy it from, Kevin?
Yes, well, there's a number of routes, and we'll always encourage people to go into a Maggie Centre, not just for the book, because Maggie Centres are amazing places, and there's 27 of them across the UK. You can buy it online at the usual places, Amazon, bookshop.org. You can buy it direct from our website, which is storiesofcancerandhope.co.uk. You can buy it in Watersons. Your local bookshop can get a hold of it within a couple of days if they don't stock it. And there's a number of cancer centres, all across the UK that may well have copies just to sit and read or even to borrow. And it's available as an ebook as well on all the ebook platforms. And all royalties go to Maggie's Cancer Centre. And so to date we've donated over £2,000. We've got another cheque that we'll be presenting to them in a few weeks' time as well from the royalties.
Fantastic. I know you mentioned the name within your website, but what's the name of the book again, Kevin?
Yeah. The name of the book is called Stories of Cancer and Hope. And if you search for it, you'll find a number of routes. And most publishers would hate me saying this, but if you get a copy of the book and you found that it's helped you, and you know someone else who can help, then pass it on. Please pass the hope on to someone else. Absolutely.
I'm at my cancer centre imminently for my routine scan, so I will take a walk to Maggie's and have a look. So I look forward to having a look at a copy. Just finally, if you were to give one bit of information to somebody who's been recently diagnosed, what would you say? A bit of advice or information or something to consider?
Don't try and do this on your own. It's very tempting, especially for blokes. We don't like talking and sharing things, but do not try and do this on your own. And I'm not just talking about the physical treatment. Cancer, it's a mental battle. It's a mental challenge. And there are amazing organisations out there. There are support groups, as you and I both know as well. And it takes a while to process, when you've been told that you've got cancer. You might not immediately go and see someone from Macmillan or Maggie's or any of the other amazing charities out there. It takes time to process, but you will find strength and support from organisations, support groups and charities that are willing to help you. And one of the strangest things I've found, Steve, is I have met so many amazing people in my life that I would not have met if it wasn't for cancer. It sounds very strange to say that, but do not try and do this on your own. Help is out there.
Absolutely. I absolutely echo everything you've just said there. And Kevin, thank you so much for your time today. I'm sure our listeners will be inspired by what you've been through and how you've taken the adversity and done something so powerful for others. I want to again thank our sponsors, the Resilience Room and Corporate Wellbeing Solutions. Also, I want to say I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If so, I'd like to ask a little favour. Could you please leave a review on the podcast on whichever platform you get it from? I know Apple have a specific place for reviews and Spotify have a review scoring system. This helps raise the profile, enables more people to be interested in joining as a guest. And if you want more information about the services I provide, such as counselling and public speaking, please visit my website on www.stevepoyntoncounsellinandsupport.co.uk. And I'd also love to hear from you. What subjects would you like to hear about? Where have your struggles been? Would you like to come on the podcast and discuss that? If so, please reach out to info@stevepoyntoncounsellinandsupport.co.uk. Once again, thank you, Kevin, and I look forward to speaking to you all soon.
Thanks, Steve.